Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's more of the same, more attacks, more deaths, more threats, more uncertainty. Israel is fighting on all fronts, Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon and the Houthis from Yemen. It is also gearing up to attack Iran. But where will it strike? Nuclear, oil or military facilities of Iran? US President Joe Biden has made a revelation. Meanwhile, in Tehran, Ayatollah Khamenei made a rare appearance to address the Friday prayers and deliver a message to his people and his adversaries. The rest of the world is bracing for impact. Oil prices are going up, stock markets are falling. What would an escalation mean for India politically and economically? We'll discuss that tonight. And why has Israel declared an open war on the United Nations? We'll bring you a report on that too. In other news, Europe has sprouted a spine. It has slapped tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. But not everyone is on board, and will they stay the course? In the US, Melania Trump is championing abortion rights while her husband can't seem to make up his mind and his party is firmly against abortion. We'll break it down for you. And in India, the government has for the first time explained its stand on marital rape, saying it should not be criminalized because that would be, and I'm quoting, excessively harsh. We'll tell you why we disagree. But first, the headlines. Iran would back a simultaneous ceasefire with Israel in Gaza and Lebanon. Their foreign minister makes the announcement during his visit to Beirut, but the minister says any such deal would first have to be accepted by the Hezbollah, and it must respect the rights of the people of Lebanon and Gaza. India's External Affairs Minister will visit Pakistan in a rare trip later this month, as Jaishankar will go there to attend a meeting at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This will be the first visit by an Indian foreign minister to Pakistan in 9 years. The last one was by Sushma Swaraj in 2015. Maldives President Mohammad Muizzu to visit India on Sunday. It will be his first state visit to the country. The focus will be on repairing fraught ties between the two countries. Pro-China Muizzu came to power a year ago on a promise to evict Indian troops deployed in the strategically located archipelago. And Tunisia will hold its presidential election on Sunday. The incumbent Kais Saied is poised for victory. His most prominent critics have been jailed. There have been no campaign rallies or public debates. The North African country has also barred independent election observers. It's day 3 of the escalation in West Asia. Israel is still bombing Lebanon. More than 30 people have died in the last 24 hours. Threats of retaliation are getting louder and speculation is rife. What is Israel's plan? Where will Netanyahu strike in Iran and when? The Israeli ambassador to India told us yesterday that Iran should be ready for a surprise. But US President Joe Biden might have given it away. Listen to what he said.
Do you support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, sir?
We're in discussion of that. I think that would be a little, anyway.
Israel could strike Iranian oil facilities with some help from the Americans, but that may not be the only target. Israel has a long list of potential targets. It wants to keep fighting Iran and its proxies on all fronts. Yesterday, Israel stepped up airstrikes on Lebanon. It launched a barrage of attacks on Beirut. It was one of the heaviest bombardments that Beirut has faced so far. The Israelis were after a high-value target. It was this man, Hashim Safiuddin. He's said to be the next leader of the Hezbollah. Israel got a tip-off. They received information that Safiuddin was in a bunker in Beirut. So the Israelis sensed an opportunity. They moved quickly and ordered these airstrikes. The goal was to eliminate Safiuddin before he becomes the next leader of Hezbollah. But were they successful? We do not know for sure. Safiuddin's bunker was deep underground, so it's not clear if Israel hit the mark or not. There is no confirmation. But this operation does reveal Israel's mindset. It wants to keep this offensive going. It wants to weaken Iran and its proxies across the region. Taking out Safiuddin would be a step towards that goal. It would further weaken the Hezbollah and deal a blow to Iran. Now, Safiuddin has strong ties with Tehran. He studied in Iran. He enjoys a personal relationship with the regime there. He was also a close friend of Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the one who was killed in 2020 in an American airstrike. Later the same year, in 2020, Soleimani's daughter married Safiuddin's son. That's how close he is to the Iranian regime. And that is why Israel is after him. It doesn't want to allow the Hezbollah time to recover.
Our forces in Lebanon are eliminating more and more commanders and terrorists. Every such encounter ends with us having the upper hand. Our forces are ready and trained more than ever, loaded with experience from fighting in Gaza, and their advantage in the battlefield is clear. The forces are accompanied by fire capabilities from the air and from the ground, and they fight with great courage.
Israel is following the same strategy on other fronts too, like the West Bank. Israeli forces conducted an airstrike in the West Bank yesterday. They targeted a refugee camp and they claimed to have killed a local Hamas leader there. But there were civilian casualties too. At least 18 people are said to have died at this camp.
We are used to missile sounds, drones, and the explosive drones, but the sound was strong. We haven't heard this sound since 2002, during the Second Palestinian Uprising. During the Al-Aqsa Uprising, we didn't hear this kind of explosion. The missiles targeted a civilian building. A family was wiped from the civil registry. What was their fault? The family was asleep in their house. There is no safe place for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves.
Israel also targeted Syria again with an airstrike near the Masna border crossing. They destroyed a crucial road there. It connected Lebanon to Syria. Thousands of people have used this route in recent days. They were fleeing from the Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Israel claims that the Hezbollah was using this road to move military equipment. So they struck it. And the strike has left a 12-feet-wide crater there. Fighting is intensifying in Gaza as well. Israel's ground and air operations continue there. Today, more than 50 Gazans have died, including children. And so far, over 41,000 people have died in Gaza since last October. Now, Israel is fighting on all fronts. In the north with Lebanon, in the West Bank, and down south in Gaza. Israeli forces are stretched, and the Iranian proxies know this. They're testing Israel's defenses. The Houthis from Yemen launched a fresh drone attack. They targeted Tel Aviv and Jaffa yesterday.
The Yemeni Armed Forces Drone Air Force carried out a military operation targeting a vital target in the Jaffa area, Tel Aviv, and in occupied Palestine, using a number of Jaffa drones. The operation achieved its goals successfully, thank God.
And few hours back, sirens rang out in southern Israel. This has happened for the first time in 2 months. Israel says Hamas is targeting and threatening its people again, Israeli people. So has the Hamas fired more rockets into Israel? The IDF did not say it in so many words, but when the sirens are sounded, it usually means that an aerial attack is underway. At this point, it seems that all players are bracing for impact and gearing up for assault. So Israel is escalating in Lebanon. But what is Iran up to? They're putting up a show of defiance. Iran's supreme leader made a rare move today. That's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He gave a public sermon during the Friday prayers. Now, as you know, the Friday prayer is sacred for Muslims, but Khamenei rarely leads it. In fact, the last such instance was nearly 5 years ago. Considering the circumstances, he did it again today. Tens of thousands of people gathered outside the mosque to hear him speak. And what did he say? He said that Tuesday's attack was minimum punishment for Israel and that Iran and its allies would not back down.
The operation that our armed forces did was the minimum punishment against the astonishing crimes of that regime. Israel is malignant, rootless, fake, and unstable entity, has kept itself standing with difficulty through America's support, and it will not survive, God willing. The resistance in the region will not back down with these martyrdoms and will win.
Did you see the gun beside Khamenei? That was part of the message. In Iran, the supreme leader is a religious and a political figure. Today, Khamenei donned both hats. He said Iran would neither delay nor rush to attack Israel. That was the policy bit. After that, he called for Islamic unity. He said Muslims from Afghanistan to Gaza to Lebanon must all strap their belt of resistance. Sounds strange, I know. Maybe it sounds better in Farsi. Either way, Khamenei's sermon had two objectives. One, to reassure the Iranian people. There's a lot of confusion around what will happen next, around how Israel will escalate, which is why Khamenei had to speak out. He had to be seen and heard. That was the first objective. Number two, it was a message to Israel. Khamenei called this week's attack minimum punishment. He's basically trying to say that there is more in store, so don't think about escalating. That's what he's telling the Iranians. But let's face it, the Israelis in fact, but let's face it, even Iran knows that an attack is coming. It's only a question of when and where. So how is the country preparing for it? We are seeing a three-part mission. The first is diplomatic. Iran's president visited Qatar this week. He also met Saudi Arabia's foreign minister there. Reports say the Gulf states have promised neutrality. They will not side with either Israel or Iran. Today, Iran's foreign minister traveled to Beirut. He landed amid Israeli airstrikes on the city, which is quite a risky trip to make. And what's on the agenda? He's already met Lebanon's caretaker prime minister. Chances are talks focused on the war. You see, Lebanon effectively has two power centers. One is the civilian government, the other is the Hezbollah. On Monday, the Prime Minister made an interesting statement. He said that he is willing to end Hezbollah's armed presence in southern Lebanon. Not for free, of course, in exchange for a ceasefire. Now, this may not work well for Iran. They would like Hezbollah and the government to be on the same page. So that's the diplomatic campaign. Part two is the military preparation. Frankly, there isn't much that Iran can do at this point. They do not have sophisticated air defense systems, not like Israel or the West. What they have is the S-300 missiles. These are Russian air defense systems. Iran bought them in 2007 for $800 million. They've been asking for the latest version, for the latest S-400 missiles as well, but Russia has been reluctant. Plus, Iran has some homegrown defenses, like the Arman anti-ballistic missile system and Azaraksh air defense system. These were unveiled in February this year. But in April, Israel managed to punch through them. In fact, part of an S-300 system was destroyed, which brings us to the third part of their campaign, bracing for impact. Let me show you two sets of satellite pictures. Both show Iran's Kharg Island oil terminal. Around 90% of their oil exports pass through here. In September, you can see tankers surrounding the terminal. But now, all of them are gone. Chances are Iran moved these tankers away, possibly to protect them from an Israeli strike. So Iran is preparing both politically and militarily, but their biggest challenge is not the looming Israeli attack. It's the question of what they will do afterwards. Iran attacked Israel on Tuesday night with about 200 missiles. They managed to hit a few military bases and the Mossad headquarters. There were no Israeli casualties. One Palestinian died. But that doesn't mean that all is forgiven and forgotten. Take it from Benjamin Netanyahu.
Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it. We will keep to the rule we have determined. Whoever attacks us, we attack them.
Netanyahu said that on Tuesday, within hours of the Iranian attack. But since then, he has been focusing on Lebanon. We haven't seen direct retaliation against Iran yet. And that's because Israel is figuring out what to strike, where to strike. There are a number of potential targets: nuclear, oil, military facilities in Iran. Let's look at them one by one. First, there's Iran's nuclear program. Now, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. It was work in progress. But officially, Tehran stopped developing nukes in the year 2003, or rather, they paused their efforts. That's what they say. But they still have nuclear facilities all over the country, as you can see on this map. Iran can make weapons-grade nuclear material. It can enrich uranium at some of these sites, and these facilities are in use, despite the nuclear pause. Tehran hasn't gone all the way yet, but it keeps nuclear material production on the precipice, so that if anything major happens, it can rapidly complete a nuclear weapon or two. All of Iran's enemies know this. Israel knows it, the US knows it, and everyone else does, which is why Joe Biden said this.
An attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. I think there's things we'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all seven of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
Sir.
Some of Iran's nuclear sites are protected, deep underground. It would be almost impossible to blow them up. So if Israel manages to blow up one nuclear facility, Iran can ramp up production at another and develop a working nuclear bomb in a matter of days. That is why Joe Biden doesn't want Israel to go after Iran's nuclear sites, because that is an all-or-nothing gamble. If even one site is still functional, then Iran will become the world's next nuclear power. That is why Israel probably won't target Iran's nuclear facilities, at least not seriously. But they could conduct a symbolic strike at one of the smaller facilities, just to show Iran that Israel can attack their nuclear sites. And this was suggested by a former Israeli prime minister. His name is Ehud Barak. He said this was a possibility, and it won't be a first. Israel did something similar in April. After Iran launched its first missile barrage in April this year, Israel responded by attacking an Iranian facility near the city of Isfahan. The attack was close to an Iranian nuclear site, even though it wasn't directly targeted. Israel basically let them off with a warning, a symbolic show. So a direct but limited attack at a nuclear plant could be an option, at least according to Israel's former prime minister, even though it is risky. But Netanyahu has other options too, including going back to the basics. Israel could just target military facilities, airfields, drone bases, missile silos. It could even go after production facilities, target Iran's drone and missile factories. It isn't flashy, it isn't extremely sophisticated, but it will send the message. And technically, this is the only thing allowed according to the standard rules of war. But Israel hasn't really been playing by any rules lately. Netanyahu doesn't care about what he hits, as long as it does serious damage. And what will really hurt Iran is going after its pocket.
Would you support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, sir?
We're in discussion of that. I think that would be a little, anyway.
That looks like another Biden blooper. He revealed that Israel is thinking about attacking Iran's oil facilities. Biden said discussions are ongoing. Is the U.S. discussing this internally? Are they holding discussions with Israel? Biden did not confirm, but it seems that attacks on Iranian oil are a possibility. So let's turn to the map again. Iran is an oil-rich nation. It has drilling facilities, refineries, and export terminals everywhere. But the sites you're seeing are only the major ones. Israel's most obvious target would be the Kurg oil terminal. It's on an island in the Persian Gulf, removed from the Iranian mainland. But more importantly, it's Tehran's biggest export hub by far. The Kurg oil terminal handles more than 90% of Iran's exports. That's millions of barrels every day being converted into essential funds to keep Iran's regime afloat. If this export stops, Iran gets hammered economically. But this will also have a domino effect. Iran mostly sells oil to China. If Tehran is forced to stop, Beijing will look elsewhere, causing prices to surge. And Joe Biden won't like that because oil prices are a sensitive topic this close to US elections. So Biden may try and stop Netanyahu from hitting the Kurg oil terminal, but there are other oil facilities as well, like the Abadan refinery near Iran's border with Iraq. This is a domestic facility, so if Israel attacks it, global prices may still remain stable, and Netanyahu will have his revenge. It's cynical because ordinary people will bear the brunt, but Israel may still consider it an option. There are other facilities too, of course, like the Kish and Keshm Islands near the Strait of Hormuz. These are smaller export hubs, so attacking them would just be symbolic. But will that be enough for Prime Minister Netanyahu? As you can see, there are a lot of factors for Israel to consider, and it will take action after thinking things through, hopefully. It's a tense situation because their next move has the potential to push West Asia over the edge and plunge the world into chaos. We are hoping it doesn't come to that. Global oil markets and global markets in general are feeling the pressure of all of this. Investors are rattled. There was a sell-off in the Indian stock markets. Both the Nifty and the Sensex were down for the 5th consecutive day today. US stocks have also been wobbly for the past few days. Today they saw some recovery, but oil markets have been hit the hardest in this conflict. Prices have shot up sharply. Brent crude is now trading at $76 a barrel. Before the Iranian attack, the price of one barrel of oil was $71. Now it's $76. So in a matter of 3 days, the price has shot up by $5. Remember, oil is the biggest exporter of West Asia. This region accounts for a little over 30% of the global oil production. It churns out about 30 million barrels of oil every day. A protracted conflict could disrupt this supply. The immediate worry is over the supply of Iranian oil. Like we just discussed, Israel could target Iran's oil infrastructure, and Iran has a significant stockpile. It produces 2 million barrels of crude every day. That's about 2% of the world's supply. It may not seem like a big number, but it is significant, and I'll tell you why. Imagine that Israel disrupts Iranian oil supplies. What happens then? Prices shoot up dramatically by as much as $13 per barrel, according to some estimates. That means that if today's price is $76 a barrel, after Israel's retaliation/attack, oil could cost almost $90 for every barrel. The IMF is worried. That's the International Monetary Fund. It has issued a warning. It says an escalation would have significant ramifications and the damage won't be limited to West Asia. The entire global economy would feel the impact. A wider war would have a domino effect on all kinds of goods. Commodities like grains could get expensive. The cost of shipping goods will soar. This is exactly what happened last year too, when shipments were targeted by missiles, mostly by the Houthis in the Red Sea. In fact, it might be happening again. The Houthis have released a video. They targeted a ship in the region earlier this week. The Houthis attacked 2 vessels in all. This one, which burst into flames, was a British oil tanker. The ship sustained some damage. Reports say the crew is safe. This is exactly the kind of scenario that the IMF is worried about. The Houthis are reminding the world how easy it is for them to create chaos again. If this war expands further, it would hurt everyone. And countries like India, which heavily rely on imports, would feel the impact even more. Let's go back to the example of oil. India is one of the largest importers of oil in the world, so India is particularly sensitive to any increase in oil prices. Each time the price of a barrel rises by $10, inflation in India spikes by 0.3% because everything becomes more expensive. High oil prices impact several areas of the economy. If oil keeps rising, transporting goods will become more expensive. Ultimately, it's people like you and me who have to bear the extra cost because companies will invariably pass the added cost to consumers. This war could also disrupt the government's finances. It could increase the current account deficit. What's that? It's the difference between imports and exports, the current account deficit. A $10 rise in oil prices will force India to pay over $12 billion extra for the same supply. It may not come to that if the situation does not escalate further, but that's unlikely. Because as things stand, neither side is willing to back down. The global economy once again faces uncertain times.
The escalation of violence, the deterioration in the security situation is a matter of deep concern for us.
It's the worst place to be in. Stuck between two friends who are fighting, and that is India right now. New Delhi has close relations with both Iran and Israel, cultural ties, economic ties, military ties. So this face-off is a political challenge. Today, India called for de-escalation in West Asia. It also cautioned against a wider war.
We had said that the escalation of violence, the deterioration in the security situation is a matter of deep concern for us. And we had reiterated a call for restraint by all concerned and also protection of civilians. It is important in our opinion that this particular conflict doesn't take a wider regional dimension.
You may be thinking, isn't this familiar territory? India has struck a balance in Ukraine, so why not West Asia? A, because there is a lot more at stake, both financially and politically, and B, because the relationships are quite different. Israel is not Russia, and Iran is not Ukraine. So the policy will have to be different. First, let's look at the stakes. Around 46% of India's oil comes from West Asia. So does 70% of India's gas, 70. And how do these shipments reach India? Mostly via the Strait of Hormuz. If war breaks out or escalates further, Iran could cut this trade route off. Secondly, India has a lot of people there, nearly 3,000 in Lebanon, 10,000 in Iran, and 30,000 in Israel, according to India's Ministry of External Affairs. Put together, nearly 9 million people, nearly 9 million Indians in West Asia. Their safety will be the main concern. Finally, you have investments in the region. India is developing a terminal at Iran's Chabahar port. The plan is to invest $120 million. Once completed, it will give India access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan. And if war breaks out, the project may have to be paused. With Israel, the stakes are possibly bigger. India is building a transcontinental trade route to Europe. It passes through the Arabian Peninsula and Israel to reach the Mediterranean. It's a grand transport corridor, a multi-billion-dollar project. But if war breaks out, that too may be put on hold. So India's best-case scenario is de-escalation. If this face-off continues, it will put India in a difficult place. Let me explain this. Over the years, India has balanced its relations with Israel and Iran, sort of de-hyphenated it. Israel is one of our biggest weapon suppliers, but we also hold joint military drills with Iran. In fact, Indian warships were docked in Iran when they attacked Israel. So clearly, it's a good balancing act that India has done so far, but also a delicate one. Because this dehyphenation is based on stability in West Asia on the condition that Israel and Iran are not in open war. If they are, equations may change. So what options does India have? Well, New Delhi is in a good position to negotiate. Both Israeli and Iranian officials have admitted this. Even India's foreign minister said that he is game.
There are things to be said and passed on and passed back. I think those are all contributions that we can make, and we do.
Brokering deals is not really India's style, but this time New Delhi may be tempted. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has invested a lot in this region. He has visited West Asia more than a dozen times in the last 10 years. In fact, it's a key part of his larger policy. The government of India sees West Asia as a source of foreign investment, especially the Gulf states. It also sees West Asia as a bridge, a gateway to lucrative European markets. With all that on the line, perhaps India will be tempted to play a major role. Yesterday, Prime Minister Modi convened the Cabinet Committee on Security. It's India's topmost body on national security issues. And what did they discuss? The recent escalation in West Asia, especially the impact on trade, oil and supply chains. So India has the tools to mediate. This time, it may also have the will. But at the end of the day, it comes down to Israel and Iran, whether they want war or not. When two countries fight, who do we call to settle it? Most times it's the United Nations. They may not have an impressive track record, but they're all that we have. Not in this war, though, because Israel wants nothing to do with the UN. They've accused United Nations officials of siding with Hamas. Their airstrikes have killed dozens of UN staff, and now they have banned the United Nations chief from entering Israel. It is an unprecedented situation. And don't get us wrong, no one here is a fan of the United Nations. They have failed to prevent conflicts in most parts of the world. But what explains this open animosity, this relentless targeting of UN officials by Israel? Our next report tells you.
Israel is fighting on many fronts, in Gaza, in Lebanon, and maybe soon against Iran. But away from West Asia, it's also fighting a different kind of war, against the United Nations in New York. Israel fired the latest salvo this week. They declared the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, persona non grata, meaning he's banned from entering Israel. The official reason is that Guterres did not blame Iran for the recent escalation, but frankly, it was brewing for a while. The UN has been critical of Israel's war in Gaza, especially Guterres. The tiff began with his comments after the Hamas attack in October last year.
This most recent violence does not come in a vacuum. The reality is that it grows out of a long-standing conflict with a 56-year-long occupation and no political end in sight.
That was before Israel began attacking. Since the war started, his criticism has only grown.
The time has come for action. Action to end this god-awful nightmare.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Naturally, Israel wasn't happy. They said Guterres wasn't fit to lead the UN. But these remarks alone did not trigger Israel. Let me introduce the UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine. They distribute humanitarian aid in Gaza, and to do that, they hire from the local population. Israel claims that some UNRWA staff were involved in the Hamas attack, and they may have been right. In August, the UN fired 9 staff members in Gaza. Why? Because of possible involvement with Hamas. Justice done, right? Well, not for Israel. They've been targeting aid centers and schools. Their strikes have killed 220 UN staff in Gaza. It's been another point of friction. The UN says that Israel is targeting its workers. Israel says the UN is biased.
Until the Jewish state is treated like other nations, until this anti-Semitic swamp is drained, the UN will be viewed by fair-minded people everywhere as nothing more than a contemptuous farce.
It's frankly ironic because Israel was created by the UN. In 1947, the General Assembly voted to partition Palestine. 55% of the land was given to Jewish people. Thus, the State of Israel was born. But today, the UN and Israel are at each other's throats. The UN cannot ignore the blatant abuses in Gaza and Lebanon, and Israel must defend itself when accused. But to ban the UN chief? It's unlikely to be a popular strategy. Most of the world agrees that the UN is ineffective, but no one calls it evil or anti-Semitic. After all, the UN is just a middleman. Even Israel's ally, the United States, realizes this.
Israel capped his statement this morning that Antonio Guterres would be banned from entering Israel. Do you have any response to that?
I don't find that, we don't find that step to be productive in any way.
Fighting the UN is a losing battle. At best, it's a naive strategy. At worst, it's an affront to law-abiding nations across the world.
Now let's shift gears and look at what Europe has been up to. Today there was a historic vote. The European Union had gathered to address a tricky problem: tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Now, before we get to the story, a quick primer. A tariff is like a tax on imported goods. Companies pay tariffs to do business in foreign countries. It's like a cut that your government takes to allow foreign countries to ply their goods. What this means for you is that the foreign products become more expensive. You see, companies exist to make profits. If they're forced to pay a tariff, they make up the difference by hiking their prices, meaning you, the consumer, have to pay more. Now, with that out of the way, let's turn to Europe's dilemma. A few weeks ago, the EU decided to impose tariffs on Chinese EVs. Why? The official reason is convoluted. Overcapacity, illegal state subsidies, you'll hear these terms and others like these being thrown about. But the real reason is quite simple. Chinese EVs were flooding the European market, undermining local automobile firms because the Chinese cars were cheaper. So Europe made up some excuses and slapped tariffs. The goal is to make Chinese EVs more expensive, in the hope that if the Chinese cars become more costly, Europeans will opt for local products instead. It's basic protectionism. But not all EU members thought this way. There were stark divisions within the bloc. A major dissenter was Germany, Europe's economic engine and traditional automobile hub.
We regret that today there was no majority from the EU member states to stop the decision, although there were a great many no votes and abstentions. And in this context, I very much welcome the fact that the German government at least responded with a clear no. Today's decision may be the beginning of a further escalation in the trade disputes with China. We need to hold critical discussions here, but we do not consider the instrument of introducing tariffs to be appropriate. And the news is also difficult for consumers, because the tariffs will make electric cars more expensive.
Now that may sound odd, that Germany wanted to encourage competition. After all, the tariffs were meant to benefit local companies, but that won't help Germany. Because most German auto companies have factories in China. They make the bulk of their products abroad and then import them. So a lot of German cars in Europe are actually made in China. The automobile factories in Europe are effectively showpieces. The firms make their real money by manufacturing in China and then selling to the rest of the world. So these German brands will also have to pay tariffs for bringing their China-made cars back to Europe. That is why Germany was opposed to the tariffs. Other EU members were also against the measure because they import a lot of things from China and they're afraid of retaliation, which, by the way, has already begun, the retaliation. After the EU first announced the EV tariffs, China started looking into European exports, like pork, dairy and brandy. A classic case of tit for tat. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán summed it up best.
Let us make it clear. What we are doing now, and what they're making us do, what the European Union is doing, is an economic Cold War.
He doesn't want a trade war with China. Neither did Germany, Malta, Slovenia and Slovakia. These countries voted against the tariffs, but it wasn't enough to block them. So the EU will place tariffs on Chinese EV imports. They will range from 8 to 35%, depending on the Chinese company. And you can be sure that China will retaliate unless Europe backs down and reaches some sort of settlement. In fact, negotiations are still on. The EU can still work out a compromise. The deadline is October 30th. But now let's take a step back and think of the bigger picture. Should the EU back down? Yes, the tariffs will spark a trade war. Yes, prices will go up. Yes, protectionism will rise. But so what? Is that really a bad thing in the long run? Europe is where it is today because it is no longer competitive. Why did the German companies make plants in China? Because they could not make competitive cars at home. And what was the result? Job losses, stagnation, and finally utter dependence on Chinese imports. Things are slightly cheaper, sure, but Europe is now dependent on Beijing's good graces. It prays for China's forgiveness and fears tariffs on pork, milk and brandy. Seriously, how the mighty have fallen. Perhaps it's time for Europe and the world to introspect. Yes, globalization can be a good thing. It can make things more affordable for common people. But how far should you go? Should you surrender your sovereignty for pretty Chinese baubles? There needs to be a balance, at least a little bit of protectionism, we say. Local production may lead to higher costs, but it also generates jobs. It provides security from supply chain disruptions, and it gives you some leverage, especially when dealing with bullies like China. The EU has finally shown some spine. Hopefully, they do not capitulate by the end of this month. As for the rest of the world, perhaps it's time we start fine-tuning our own policies to make sure we don't become as fearful as the once mighty Europe. Why should anyone other than the woman herself have the power to determine what she does with her own body? It's a good question, but we aren't the ones asking it. Melania Trump is the former First Lady of the United States, whose husband, Donald Trump, is seeking re-election. Melania Trump is bracing to release a memoir where she has taken a pro-abortion stance. And this may come as a shock. But it also comes at a crucial time when abortion is a hot-button topic in the presidential election and Donald Trump is still deciding how to press it. He has gone from taking credit for upending the constitutional right to abortion to claiming that he will veto any federal abortion ban. Amid this back and forth, how will Melania Trump's words affect her husband's chances? And is she the first Republican former First Lady to have a contrasting stance on abortion with her husband? Here's a report.
It is imperative to guarantee that women have autonomy in deciding their preference of having children based on their own convictions, free from any intervention or pressure from the government. These words don't belong to a gender studies academic. This is what Melania Trump is saying. Yes, the wife of Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee who takes credit for helping overturn Roe v. Wade, upending the constitutional right to abortion in the United States. Melania's statement is quite a contrast from her husband's move when he was president. Melania is promoting her soon-to-be-released memoir. Reports say that in the book, she takes a clear pro-choice stance. This week, an excerpt from the book proved this. Why should anyone other than the woman herself have the power to determine what she does with her own body? Restricting a woman's right to choose whether to terminate an unwanted pregnancy is the same as denying her control over her own body. After the excerpt was released, Trump also went on X to reiterate her message. This time with black and white tones and stirring music, she says, "There is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth, individual freedom." Well, obviously. But why is Melania Trump suddenly having this eureka moment? You see, her statements come at a crucial time. abortion is a key issue in the upcoming US elections, and it's considered one of the weakest points for the Republican Party. It's a tightrope walk for Donald Trump. On the one hand, he needs the support of the conservatives who oppose abortion. On the other hand, the wider electorate base supports the access. So throughout the election, Trump has enjoyed his time on a seesaw of policy opinions. Earlier on the campaign trail, he bragged about helping overturn Roe. But ever since Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee and the flag bearer of a pro-abortion stance, Trump has abandoned his previous approach. Now he's trying very hard to convince the US voters that he can protect their right to abortion. Earlier this week, he said that he would veto any federal abortion ban, which was a first for him. So is Melania trying to support Trump's shifting stance by giving that final push, especially in the swing states? We are no mind readers, but that doesn't track completely. After all, Melania Trump has been largely absent from the campaign trail so far. But one thing is clear. Trump has joined a special hall of fame of Republican former First Ladies who have supported abortion rights even when their husbands didn't. First Lady Betty Ford did it, as did Nancy Reagan, so did Barbara Bush, and her daughter-in-law Laura Bush. The only differentiating factor for Melania Trump is that she's the only First Lady to support abortion publicly while her husband is actively seeking re-election. Others did it while their husbands were in office or out of it. So will Melania's pro-abortion stance help or hurt Donald Trump? We'll have the answer in a few weeks.
For our last story tonight, let me begin with a difficult but basic question. What constitutes rape? You may say forced sex. But in legal terms, it's not that simple. For instance, in India, according to the law, rape means sexual acts by a man on a woman against her free will. But this is not a blanket statement. It has two exceptions. First is a medical procedure, and second, sexual acts by a man on his wife, when the wife is above 18 years of age, which means marital rape is not a crime in India. And it is this provision, this second exception, that has spurred a heated debate. It has been challenged in court. It has been tested time and again, and it has fueled anger and confusion. And now, for the first time, the government of India has gone on record and defended their stance. The Home Ministry has submitted an affidavit to the Supreme Court of India. Let me tell you what it says, and I'm quoting, "A husband certainly does not have any fundamental right to violate the consent of the wife. However, attracting the crime in the nature of rape can be arguably considered to be excessively harsh and therefore disproportionate." In other words, criminalizing marital rape will be excessively harsh. No matter where you stand on this issue, I assume you have strong opinions. So let's look at both sides. Why is calling marital rape rape excessively harsh? The government has given three reasons. First, marriage is a relationship, but it has a so-called different class. And criminalizing marital rape can disturb the marriage. That's the first reason they've given. Second reason, in a marriage, sex is implied, so consent can be assumed. And third reason, there are existing laws that deal with domestic violence. They cover sexual assault, so we don't need a separate one for marital rape. These are the three main arguments. But unsurprisingly, they have been widely criticized. Let's go point by point. First, disturbance of marriage. Now, if rape does not disturb your relationship, what does? Just the law that criminalizes it? Violence within marriage is rampant in India. 1 in 3 married women experience some kind of violence from their husbands, and 1 in 25 women face sexual violence like marital rape. In the world's most populous country, that means 26 million women face sexual violence at the hands of their husbands. We want to uphold the so-called sanctity of marriage. So should women simply continue to endure the abuse? Now let's come to the second argument, that consent for sex is assumed in a marriage. Yes, in matters of sexual abuse, consent is a legal grey area, but the assumption effectively strips women of their agency. They feel that saying no is taboo. And the result is this: 90% women who endure sexual violence in a marriage do not seek help, often because they themselves do not recognize it as a crime. They see it as a husband's right. Now let's come to the third argument, the existing laws. Yes, marital rape is addressed in the Domestic Violence Act, but do you know what the punishment is? Protection orders, judicial separation, and monetary compensation. There are no criminal penalties. How is this okay? Marital rape is a crime in more than 100 countries in our world, including Britain, which gave us this colonial law in the first place. But India is still among the 36 countries where marital rape is not criminalized. You may have heard of some of the other members of this club: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. So yes, this is a complicated issue. But do you know what's simple? The basic question that we answered a few minutes ago: forced sex is rape, regardless of who commits it. A family member, a husband, or a stranger. Forced sex is rape no matter where it happens. Within a marriage, outside the marriage, at home, at work, anywhere. Rape is rape, with or without the adjective that you attach to it. So not criminalizing marital rape does not save a marriage. It only saves the perpetrators. Ex-users are reporting a strange development. Donald Trump is tweeting to them. I'm not making this up. Hundreds of users have received replies from the former US president saying what? Thank you for liking my post. Now, before you ask, no, Donald Trump is not typing out these messages to hundreds of people. This is a chat bot. Its job is to give election updates to people who like Trump's post. Just one problem, though. There seems to be no filter in place. Even people in India who like the post are getting replies, and it's triggered quite a conversation. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. NASA captures the strongest solar flare in 7 years. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, an overcrowded boat sinks, killing at least 78 people. In the US, a building caught in floodwaters collides with a pole. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1957, the Soviet Union inaugurated the space age when they successfully launched Sputnik 1. This was the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.
just ripped it in fucking half. Holy fuck.